Picture a museum unlike any other, a grand hall filled not with objects you can see, but with the ghosts of what has been lost. Its silent galleries hold the empty spaces where the world's most incredible treasures should be. This is a collection of absences, a monument to the greatest mysteries of our past. Today, we are stepping through its doors to explore the stories behind these legendary gaps in history. We are going on a journey to uncover the secrets of 50 lost historical artifacts, objects of immense power, beauty, and significance that have vanished from the face of the earth, leaving behind only whispers, legends, and a tantalizing void where history should be. Think about the sheer weight of what has slipped through our fingers. These aren't just misplaced trinkets, these are foundational pieces of our collective story. We are talking about jewels that adorned ancient emperors, manuscripts containing forbidden knowledge, religious relics that inspired millions, and technological wonders so advanced they seem to belong to myth. The disappearance of each one of these artifacts is a puzzle box of human error, conquest, greed, and sometimes sheer bad luck. Their stories are detective stories spanning centuries and continents, filled with cryptic clues, shadowy figures, and dead ends that have frustrated historians and treasure hunters for generations. What makes the search for these vanished objects so compelling is the staggering possibility that they might still be out there, waiting to be found. Some are believed to lie at the bottom of the ocean, locked in sunken ships for hundreds of years. Others are thought to be hidden in forgotten vaults, sealed tombs, or even plain sight, their true identity masked by time. The recovery of just one of these legendary items could fundamentally reshape our understanding of a civilization, confirm the truth behind a fable, or even rewrite the history books as we know them. So join us as we dive into the shadows of history, counting down 50 of the most fascinating, elusive, and sought-after lost artifacts. This is a journey through the greatest mysteries ever left unsolved, and it all starts now. Our journey into the Museum of Lost History begins with perhaps the most famous and sacred object of all, an artifact whose story is woven into the very foundations of Western faith and legend. We are talking, of course, about the Ark of the Covenant. Described in intricate detail within the Bible, this was no ordinary chest. Crafted from acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold, it was adorned with two magnificent cherubim with wings outstretched. But its breathtaking exterior was nothing compared to what it was built to contain. The original stone tablets inscribed with the 10 Commandments given by God to Moses on Mount Sinai. This made the Ark the ultimate symbol of God's covenant with the people of Israel. Its power, however, went far beyond the symbolic. Biblical accounts describe it as a divine weapon of immense and terrifying force. It was said to have leveled the walls of Jericho when carried around the city. It could part the waters of the Jordan River, allowing the Israelites to cross. And in one particularly striking story, a man named Uzzah was struck dead simply for reaching out to steady the ark when the oxen pulling its cart stumbled. The message was clear. This was an object of such profound holiness that it could not be touched by human hands. It was kept within the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber of the temple in Jerusalem, a place so sacred that only the high priest could enter, and only once a year. The last definitive historical record of the Ark places it within Solomon's temple. Then, around the 6th century before the Common Era, the unthinkable happened. The Babylonian Empire under King Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem, looted the temple, and destroyed it. The biblical texts explicitly list the treasures that were taken away to Babylon, but the Ark of the Covenant is conspicuously absent from that list. It simply vanished from the historical record, sparking a mystery that has endured for 2.5 millennia. So, what became of it? The theories are as numerous as they are fascinating. One prominent Jewish tradition suggests that the prophet Jeremiah, foreseeing the Babylonian invasion, secretly removed the ark and hid it in a cave on Mount Nebo. the same mountain from which Moses viewed the Promised Land. Another, perhaps the most enduring legend, comes from Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims to possess the Ark today, safeguarded within the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in the town of Axum. Their belief is that it was brought to Ethiopia by Menelik I, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, and that it has been protected there ever since, watched over by a single, dedicated guardian. Other theories are even more speculative. Some suggest it was taken to Egypt or hidden deep beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, perhaps in a chamber that remains undiscovered. The Knights Templar, the powerful medieval order, have often been linked to the Ark, with some alleging they discovered it during their time in Jerusalem and transported it to Europe. Despite these compelling stories, no credible, verifiable evidence has ever been presented to the world. The Ethiopian Church does not allow the artifact to be seen or examined by outsiders, and countless expeditions, from amateur adventurers to serious archaeologists, have searched for clues only to come up empty-handed. The enduring quest for the Ark is more than just a search for a golden box. It is a search for a tangible connection to the divine, for proof of a foundational biblical narrative. Its discovery would be an event of unimaginable historical and religious significance, potentially validating millennia of faith. Yet its absence is, in its own way, just as powerful. It exists in that captivating space between history and myth, a permanent resident of our grand museum of the lost, reminding us that some mysteries are perhaps never meant to be solved. From the sacred to the scholarly, we move now from a lost relic of faith to the heartbreaking disappearance of an entire world of knowledge. If the Ark of the Covenant represents a spiritual void, then the Library of Alexandria represents an intellectual chasm of almost unimaginable scale. Founded in the 3rd century before the Common Era in the city of Alexandria, Egypt, this was not merely a library in the modern sense. It was the brain of the ancient world, a universal archive intended to collect a copy of every single known book. Imagine an institution so ambitious that its mission was to gather the entire sum of human knowledge under one roof, from the scientific theories of Greek philosophers to the medical texts of Egypt, the histories of Babylon, and the poems of countless cultures. The library was part of a larger research institution called the Mauseon, or the Temple of the Muses, which functioned like the world's first great university. The greatest minds of the age were drawn to Alexandria to study, debate, and write. It was here that the astronomer Aristarchus first proposed a heliocentric model of the solar system, where Euclid laid down the foundations of geometry, and where Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the Earth with astonishing accuracy. The library itself was a bustling hive of activity, with a vast core of scribes constantly copying, translating, and cataloging scrolls. Every ship that docked in the bustling port of Alexandria was searched, and any scrolls found on board were confiscated, copied, and then the copies were returned to the owners while the originals were added to the library's ever-growing collection. The destruction of this great library was not a single catastrophic event, but a slow, agonizing death by 1,000 cuts over several centuries, which makes the loss even more tragic. The first major blow is often attributed to Julius Caesar in 48 before the Common Era. During a civil war, Caesar found himself besieged in Alexandria and, in a tactical move, set fire to the Egyptian fleet in the harbor. The flames are said to have spread to the city and accidentally consumed a portion of the library's warehouses, which held thousands of scrolls. While this was a significant loss, it was likely not the death knell for the entire institution. The library continued to exist in a diminished form for centuries, suffering from neglect and further attacks. Another major incident occurred under the Roman Emperor Aurelian in the 3rd century, during a violent uprising that devastated the entire district of the city where the main library was located. Then, perhaps the most symbolically charged act of destruction is often laid at the feet of the Christian patriarch Theophilus in the year 391, who ordered the destruction of the pagan Serapeum temple, which housed a daughter library. The final blow may have come with the Muslim conquest of Alexandria in the 7th century, though the historical accounts for this are debated among scholars. The truth is, the library faded away piece by piece, its scrolls burned for fuel, its parchment scraped clean and reused, or simply left to rot from indifference. The impact of this loss is incalculable. We can only guess at the treasures that were consumed by the flames. How many plays by the great Greek tragedians like Sophocles and Aeschylus are gone forever? The library was said to have held hundreds of works by each, but we only have a handful today. What about the complete histories of other civilizations written by their own people that would have given us an unfiltered view of the ancient world? Think of the scientific and mathematical texts that might have accelerated human progress by 1,000 years. The works of the brilliant inventor Archimedes were preserved only through a few fragile copies that survived outside Alexandria. What other geniuses have been completely erased from history? The loss of the Library of Alexandria set human knowledge back immeasurably, creating a dark age that we are still, in a way, trying to climb out of. It stands as a permanent warning about the fragility of civilization itself, a ghostly testament to the price we pay when we allow our collective memory to turn to ash. Leaving behind the vanished wisdom of Alexandria, we encounter a loss of a different kind, not of knowledge, but of pure, breathtaking beauty. If the library was a monument to the mind, then our next artifact was a tribute to artistry and opulence on a scale that seems almost fantastical. We are speaking of the legendary Amber Room, a chamber whose very name evokes a sense of warm, golden splendor. Often called the eighth wonder of the world, this was not a room with amber decorations, it was a room made of amber. Imagine an entire chamber over 55 square meters in size, where every wall was a shimmering mosaic of carved amber panels, backed with gold leaf and framed in gilded wood, with magnificent mirrors designed to reflect and multiply the light until the entire space seemed to glow from within. Its story begins in the early 18th century in Prussia, a masterpiece of Baroque craft commissioned by King Frederick I. German and Danish artisans spent more than a decade creating this unparalleled wonder, using over 6 tons of the finest Baltic amber, a material often called the gold of the North. But the room's destiny lay further east. In 1716, Frederick's son, King Frederick William I, gifted the entire chamber to Tsar Peter the Great of Russia as a grand diplomatic gesture, solidifying an alliance against Sweden. The disassembled panels were carefully crated and sent to St. Petersburg, where they were later installed in the Catherine Palace, a summer residence of the Russian Tsars located in the town of Tsarskoye Selo. Over the years, Russian craftsmen expanded the room, adding more amber and incorporating semi-precious stones like jade and quartz, transforming it into an even more spectacular symbol of imperial wealth and power. For nearly 2 centuries, the Amber Room stood as a jewel of the palace, astonishing all who saw it. But its golden glow would attract a darkness that would lead to its disappearance. When Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, the curators at the Catherine Palace faced an impossible task. They tried to dismantle the room to evacuate it, but the aged amber had become brittle and began to crumble at the touch. In a desperate attempt to hide its true nature, they covered the walls with simple wallpaper. The ruse failed. Recognizing the immense cultural and material value of the treasure, the German Army's Special Looted Art Division meticulously took the room apart, packed the panels into 27 crates, and shipped them to Königsberg Castle in East Prussia, a city now known as Kaliningrad. There, the room was put on display as a testament to German conquest. And then, as the war drew to a close, it vanished. In 1944, as Allied bombers pounded Königsberg and the Soviet Red Army advanced, the room was once again crated up for its own protection. But after the city fell, no trace of the Amber Room or its crates could be found. It had simply evaporated into the fog of war, creating one of the 20th century's most enduring art mysteries. The most straightforward theory is that it was destroyed in the relentless bombing raids that reduced much of Königsberg to rubble, its precious panels burning or melting in the intense heat. However, the search for the room has been fueled by persistent rumors that it was saved. Some believe the crates were loaded onto a ship, the Wilhelm Gustloff, which was torpedoed and sunk by a Soviet submarine in the Baltic Sea in 1945, taking the amber treasure to a deep, cold grave. Others are convinced the Nazis hid the room in a secret bunker or a forgotten mine in the Thuringian forest, a theory that has prompted countless expeditions, some even funded by the German government, all of which have turned up empty-handed. There are even more shadowy claims that the room was secretly found by the Soviet Union itself and quietly stored away, or that it passed into the hands of a private collector. For decades, every new lead has sparked a wave of excitement, only to end in disappointment. In a remarkable act of dedication, a full-scale reconstruction of the Amber Room, based on old photographs and descriptions, was begun in the 1970s and finally completed and opened to the public in 2003 at the Catherine Palace. This beautiful replica allows visitors to experience a shadow of the room's former glory, but it also serves as a constant, poignant reminder of the original masterpiece that was lost to the ravages of war, a glittering ghost that continues to haunt the annals of history. Shifting our focus from the grand chambers of Europe to the forge fires of feudal Japan, we encounter an artifact that embodies a different kind of power, not divine or intellectual, but the perfected power of the warrior's craft. This is the story of the Honjō Masamune, a sword that is less a weapon and more a legend forged in steel. In Japanese culture, the sword is considered the soul of the samurai, and no swordsmith is more revered than Honjō Masamune, who worked in the late 13th and early 14th centuries. His blades are not merely tools of war, they are considered living works of art possessing an almost supernatural quality known as yawaragi, a gentle spirit that brings peace to the warrior who wields it. Among all his creations, the Honjō Masamune stands apart as his ultimate masterpiece, a katana so perfect it became a symbol of political authority itself. The sword's name comes from one of its earliest notable owners, Honjō Shigenouga, a general in the 16th century. In a legendary battle, Shigenouga's helmet was struck by an enemy's sword and cleaved in two, but the Masamune blade he carried deflected the blow, saving his life. The sword's reputation for strength and resilience was sealed. Its true historical significance, however, was cemented when it passed into the hands of the Tokugawa family, the dynasty of shoguns who would rule Japan for over 250 years during the Edo period. The Honjō Masamune became one of the Tokugawa's most cherished hereditary treasures, a physical embodiment of their right to rule. It was more than a family heirloom, it was a national treasure, a symbol of the shogunate's power and the pinnacle of Japanese craftsmanship. For centuries, the sword resided in the heart of Japanese power, a silent witness to the rise and fall of shoguns. Its journey took a dramatic and tragic turn at the end of the Second World War. As part of the surrender terms imposed by the Allied forces, Japan was required to disarm completely. The Supreme Commander for the Allied powers issued a directive ordering the surrender of all arms, which included the vast collections of historic swords owned by military families and individuals. This was a devastating blow to Japanese cultural identity. In December 1945, Tokugawa Ieyasu, the head of the family, dutifully surrendered the Honjō Masamune, along with 14 other swords from the family collection, to a police station in Tokyo. From there, the swords were taken into the custody of the US Army. This is where the mystery deepens into an enduring void. The swords were logged and stored, likely at a central collection point known as the Yokohama Swords and Arms Repository. But the bureaucratic trail goes cold shortly after. At some point in the late 1940s, as the occupation forces began to wind down their operations, countless confiscated items were processed. Some were returned to Japan as cultural artifacts, but many others were sold off as war souvenirs, given to soldiers as mementos, or simply lost in the chaotic shuffle of demobilization. The Honjō Masamune, arguably the most significant sword to have passed through American hands, vanished without a trace. It simply disappeared from the official records. The disappearance has sparked a decades-long search that continues to this day. Was it accidentally mixed in with a batch of lesser swords and sold for a pittance to an American serviceman who had no idea of its immense historical and monetary value? This is a prevailing theory among historians and collectors. It could be sitting in an attic in the American Midwest, its curved blade mistaken for a simple trophy of war. Or was it intentionally taken by someone who did recognize its worth, entering a shadowy private collection where it remains a secret treasure? The fact that such an iconic object could simply evaporate is both baffling and haunting. Unlike the Amber Room, which would be nearly impossible to hide, the Honjō Masamune is a single, relatively small object. Its very portability is what makes its disappearance so complete and its potential recovery so tantalizingly possible. The loss of the Honjō Masamune is a profound one for Japan. It represents the severing of a tangible link to the age of the samurai and the Tokugawa shogunate. For sword connoisseurs, it is the equivalent of losing the original Mona Lisa, a peerless work by the undisputed master of the craft. Its potential rediscovery would be a moment of national celebration, a repatriation of a stolen piece of the soul of Japan. Yet, its absence serves as a poignant reminder of the collateral damage of war, how the chaos of conflict can scatter not just lives, but the very artifacts that define a culture's history, leaving behind a silence where the ring of perfect steel should be. Now, we travel from the battlefields of Japan to the very heart of British authority in Ireland, for a mystery that reads less like a dry historical account and more like a sensational crime novel, complete with a cast of flamboyant characters, a high society scandal, and a brazen theft that humiliated an empire. The year is 1907, and the location is Dublin Castle, the imposing fortress that served as the central seat of British rule in Ireland. Within its secure Bedford Tower was kept a collection of regalia known as the Irish crown jewels, though they were not crowns in the traditional sense. These were the dazzling insignia of the most illustrious Order of St. Patrick, an order of chivalry established by the British monarchy to cement the loyalty of the Anglo-Irish aristocracy. The centerpieces were a magnificent star and a 5-pointed diamond badge, crafted from hundreds of Brazilian diamonds, including a stunning 8-pointed rose-cut gem known as the Regent's Diamond. These jewels were not just valuable, they were potent symbols of the crown's power, worn by the Lord Lieutenant, the King's representative in Ireland, during grand state ceremonies. The security surrounding these treasures, however, was shockingly lax. The jewels were kept in a safe within a library strongroom, a room that was supposedly guarded around the clock. But the truth was farcical. The keys to the safe were not held by a senior official, but were often left in the possession of a man named Sir Arthur Vickers, the Ulster King of Arms and the one responsible for the jewels' safekeeping. Vickers was a known bon vivant, more interested in hosting lavish parties than in rigorous security protocols. He was often seen showing off the jewels to guests after having a bit too much to drink. The safe's combination was even said to have been written down and left in a drawer. It was an environment ripe for disaster, and on July 6, 1907, disaster struck. During a routine inspection ahead of a visit by King Edward VII, the safe was opened to reveal an empty velvet-lined box. The Irish crown jewels were gone. The subsequent investigation immediately plunged into a quagmire of suspicion and cover-up, complicated by a burgeoning gay scandal that the establishment was desperate to hide. The Dublin Castle administration was a hotbed of gossip, and at the center of it was Sir Arthur Vickers and his circle of young, attractive male assistants. The prime suspect quickly became one of these assistants, a man named Francis Shackleton, the brother of the famous Antarctic explorer Ernest Shackleton. Francis was a charismatic and ambitious man, but he was also deeply in debt and known for his extravagant lifestyle. Crucially, he had access to the keys and was familiar with the castle's routines. The investigation also revealed that the locks on the library door had been tampered with, but the real lock on the safe had been opened with its key, pointing strongly to an inside job. But the case became impossibly tangled in a web of personal and political scandal. Rumors swirled about homosexual relationships among the castle officials, a criminal offense at the time. It was widely believed that the authorities, including the king himself, were far less interested in recovering the jewels than they were in preventing a public trial that would expose these relationships and create a monumental embarrassment for the crown. A commission of inquiry was established, but it was widely seen as a whitewash. Sir Arthur Vickers was made the scapegoat, fired from his position in disgrace for his negligence, while Francis Shackleton was never formally charged with the theft. The investigation was abruptly shut down, and the official files were sealed for decades, fueling endless speculation about a high-level cover-up. So, what truly happened to the jewels? The theories are as murky as the investigation itself. The most straightforward theory is that Shackleton, needing money to pay off his creditors, masterminded the theft and had the jewels broken up and the stones sold individually on the continental black market. This would explain why they have never surfaced intact. Others suggest the theft was an inside job with a political motive, perhaps orchestrated by Irish nationalists to embarrass the British administration right before the king's visit. There's even a more sinister theory that the theft was allowed to happen, or even staged by elements within the British establishment to discredit Vickers and his circle and purge the castle of a lifestyle they found distasteful. The truth died with the key players. Vickers maintained his innocence until his death, tragically killed by Irish Republicans during the Irish Civil War in 1921. Shackleton's life spiraled into further crime, and he served time in prison for fraud, but he never confessed to the theft. The loss of the Irish crown jewels left a permanent stain on the history of the period. Their disappearance was a profound humiliation for the British government, exposing the corruption and incompetence at the heart of its administration in Ireland. For Ireland, the incident became a symbol of the farcical nature of British rule. The jewels themselves, those brilliant symbols of imperial authority, are almost certainly gone forever, their diamonds likely recut and scattered across the world's jewelry markets, their symbolic power dissolved. The case remains officially unsolved, a locked room mystery where the greatest theft may not have been of diamonds, but of the truth itself, stolen by the very people who were supposed to protect it. Moving from stolen jewels to a loss that strikes at the very core of our own human story, we come to a mystery that represents not just a missing object, but a missing chapter in the book of humanity. The tale of the Peking Man fossils is a heartbreaking one, a saga where groundbreaking scientific discovery collides with the brutal chaos of World War, resulting in a void that has haunted paleoanthropology for generations. These were not mere bones, they were the physical evidence of a profound evolutionary link, a treasure that unlocked secrets of our ancient past only to be snatched away into oblivion. The story begins in the 1920s in the limestone caves of Zhaokudian, a site near Beijing, China. After years of painstaking excavation, an international team of scientists unearthed something extraordinary, a collection of fossilized bones and skullcaps that belonged to a previously unknown ancestor. This was Homo erectus pekinensis, or Peking Man, a hominid that walked the earth roughly 500,000 years ago. The significance of these finds cannot be overstated. The fossils provided some of the first clear, incontrovertible evidence supporting the then controversial theory of human evolution. They showed a creature that walked upright like us, but had a smaller brain case and prominent brow ridges, a perfect transitional form between ancient apes and modern humans. Even more fascinating, the discovery of ash and burned animal bones in the caves suggested that Peking Man had mastered the use of fire, a monumental leap in human cultural development. For scientists, it was like finding the Rosetta Stone of human prehistory. By the late 1930s, with the shadow of the Second Sino-Japanese War looming large, the scientists working at the site grew increasingly anxious about the safety of their priceless finds. As Japanese forces advanced toward Beijing in 1941, a desperate plan was hatched to smuggle the fossils out of China to the United States for safekeeping until the conflict ended. The bones, along with other precious artifacts, were carefully packed into two large, standard-looking footlockers. The plan was to transport them by train from Beijing to the port city of Qinhuangdao, where they would be loaded onto the American vessel President Harrison, which was scheduled to evacuate American Marines from the area. This is where the timeline becomes murky and the trail begins to fade. The fossils are believed to have left the Peking Union Medical College, where they were stored, in the custody of a contingent of United States Marines. They reached the train station in Beijing, but what happened after they were loaded onto that train is one of history's great unsolved puzzles. The President Harrison never made it to port. It ran aground while attempting to avoid a Japanese naval blockade. Then, on December 8, 1941, the day after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japanese forces swiftly captured the train and seized the Marine detachment at Qinhuangdao. The fossils and the Marines guarding them vanished into the turmoil of war. They have not been seen since. Theories about their fate are numerous, each more tantalizing than the last. One persistent line of thought is that the fossils never actually made it to the train. Perhaps they were hidden somewhere in Beijing, buried beneath the city, or walled up in a forgotten basement of the medical college, waiting for a future generation to stumble upon them. Others believe they did reach Qinhuangdao but were then confiscated by the Japanese army. Were they recognized for their scientific value and secretly shipped to Japan? Extensive searches after the war, including investigations by American officials questioning Japanese scientists, yielded no evidence to support this. The most tragic possibility is that they were simply discarded. To an unsuspecting soldier, the heavy boxes would have contained nothing but dirty-looking old bones, deemed worthless and thrown away, perhaps buried in a landfill or even dumped into the sea. There is even a theory that the entire shipment went down with a Japanese transport ship, the Owamaru, which was sunk by an American submarine in 1945, taking its mysterious cargo to the depths of the East China Sea. The loss of the Peking Man fossils is a catastrophe for science. While plaster casts and detailed descriptions survived, the original bones held potential secrets that technology at the time could not unlock. Modern techniques like DNA analysis and advanced isotopic dating could have told us so much more about their diet, their migration patterns, and their precise place in our family tree. Their disappearance is a stark reminder of how vulnerable our shared heritage is to the fires of conflict. These ancient relatives, who survived for hundreds of thousands of years encased in stone, were lost in a matter of days to the carelessness of modern warfare. They remain the ultimate cold case, a collection of bones that taught us where we came from, only to vanish, leaving behind a profound silence where our past used to speak. Our journey now takes us high into the cloud-shrouded peaks of the Andes, to the heart of a fallen empire and a story of betrayal that gave birth to one of history's most enduring treasure legends. This is the tale of the lost Inca gold, a hoard of unimaginable wealth that represents not just a missing fortune, but the brutal collision of two worlds. The year is 1532, and the Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro, with a force of fewer than 200 men, has just achieved the unthinkable. He has captured the absolute ruler of the vast Inca Empire, the Sopa Inca Atahualpa. The scene was the Great Plaza at Cajamarca, where a misunderstanding and a surprise attack led to the slaughter of thousands of Incan soldiers and the seizure of their divine emperor. Atahualpa, treated as a living god by his people, was now a prisoner in his own land. Recognizing the Spaniards' insatiable thirst for the yellow metal they revered so intensely, Atahualpa made a desperate offer to secure his freedom. He pointed to the large room in which he was being held and promised Pizarro that he would fill it, once with gold and twice over with silver, as high as a man could reach. The volume of the room was staggering, estimated to be about 88 cubic meters. To Pizarro, it must have sounded like a fantasy, but for the Inca, gold was not currency. It was the sweat of the sun, a sacred metal used for ceremonial objects and to adorn their temples. Silver was the tears of the moon. They had it in abundance. Eager to see this promise fulfilled, Pizarro agreed, and a messenger was sent to the capital of Cusco to set the empire's vast network in motion. What followed was one of the most astonishing treasure-gathering operations in history. For months, a relentless stream of porters journeyed from every corner of the empire, carrying priceless objects on their backs. They brought forth solid gold statues of animals and gods, intricate ceremonial knives, ornate jars, dazzling plaques that once lined the walls of the Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun in Cusco, and countless other artifacts of breathtaking craftsmanship. The room began to fill, the pile of gold glinting in the mountain sun, a ransom fit for a god-king. Meanwhile, Atahualpa, still believing the Spaniards would honor their bargain, ruled his empire from captivity, even as Pizarro's men grew increasingly anxious and greedy, melting down the delivered artifacts into more easily transportable ingots. But the promise was a lie. As the flow of treasure began to slow and Spanish reinforcements arrived, Pizarro faced a dilemma. Releasing Atahualpa, a powerful and now deeply embittered ruler, would have been suicidal. Yet keeping him alive made him a rallying point for a potential uprising. Fueled by fear, ambition, and a fabricated charge of treason, Pizarro reneged on the deal. After a sham trial, Atahualpa was sentenced to death. In a final, cynical act, he was offered a choice: be burned at the stake as a heathen or be strangled by the garrote if he converted to Christianity. He chose the latter, and in July of 1533, the Sapa Inca was executed, his vast ransom delivered but his freedom stolen. The moment Atahualpa was killed, the greatest treasure train the world has ever known came to an abrupt halt. The Incan generals and priests who were still en route with the remaining ransom, upon hearing the tragic news, faced an impossible decision. They could not return to Cusco, which was now falling into chaos and soon to be occupied by the Spanish. To deliver the treasure to the murderers of their emperor was unthinkable. According to persistent legend, they made a fateful choice: they would hide the hoard. The remaining fortune, a portion of the ransom that was never delivered, was said to have been diverted and concealed in a secret location, perhaps a remote cave high in the Andes, a sunken temple in a mountain lake, or deep within the impenetrable Amazon rainforest. Some stories suggest the treasure was thrown into a sacred lake, like Lake Titicaca or the mysterious Laguna de los Condors, as an offering to the gods. This legendary cache, known as the treasure of the Dangonotes, is said to be guarded by the spirits of the Inca and the harsh, unforgiving terrain itself. For nearly 500 years, it has drawn countless fortune hunters and explorers into some of the most dangerous landscapes on Earth. The search is fueled by tantalizing clues, like the supposed map of the Spanish soldier Valverde, who claimed to have married an Incan princess and been shown the location, or the dying words of an Incan guide who spoke of a golden statue in a cave that required a human sacrifice to enter. Expeditions have vanished without a trace, succumbing to altitude sickness, treacherous cliffs, and dense jungle. The legend is so powerful that it even intertwines with other famous lost treasures, with some suggesting that the infamous treasure of the pirate Captain Kidd was actually a fraction of the lost Inca gold that had found its way across the ocean. The true value of this lost hoard transcends its weight in gold. Its discovery would provide an unparalleled window into Incan culture, art, and spirituality, showcasing a level of craftsmanship and artistic vision that the Spanish conquistadors, in their rush for wealth, melted into oblivion. We lost countless masterpieces when that first ransom was turned into ingots. The hidden portion represents the last great treasure of a civilization, saved from the smelter, a final act of defiance against annihilation. The lost Inca gold is more than a prize. It is a ghost, a symbol of a world that was brutally erased, its greatest treasures waiting silently in the mountains, a permanent reminder of a broken promise and an empire's stolen soul. But now, we turn from treasures lost to war and conquest to a mystery born from a single, brazen act of theft, one that targeted not just a painting, but the very heart of one of the most important artworks ever created. Our focus shifts to a quiet cathedral in Belgium and a crime so audacious it has baffled investigators for nearly a century. This is the story of the stolen panel of the Just Judges, a pivotal piece of the world-famous Ghent altarpiece, a theft wrapped in political intrigue, bizarre ransom demands, and a suspect who took his secrets to the grave. To understand the magnitude of this loss, one must first appreciate the altarpiece itself. Officially known as the Adoration of the Mystic Lamb, this massive polyptych, completed in 1432 by the brothers Hubert and Jan van Eyck, is routinely described as the single most stolen piece of art in history. It is a foundational masterpiece of the Northern Renaissance, a breathtaking achievement in oil painting that revolutionized art with its luminous color and microscopic detail. The altarpiece consists of multiple panels that open and close, revealing a heavenly vision centered on the Lamb of God, worshipped by saints, prophets, and angels. On the lower left side of the opened view sits the panel of the Just Judges. It depicts a group of mounted figures, believed to represent virtuous rulers throughout history, riding in solemn procession towards the Lamb. While just one component of a larger whole, its removal was like tearing a crucial chapter from a sacred book, leaving the narrative painfully incomplete. The theft occurred on the night of April 10, 1934. Thieves entered the St. Bavo Cathedral in Ghent and, with surgical precision, pried just the Just Judges panel from its frame, leaving the rest of the magnificent altarpiece untouched. The specificity of the crime was immediately puzzling. This was not a grab for the most famous central panels, it was a targeted extraction. Soon after, a series of tantalizing and bizarre ransom notes began arriving, signed simply, D. U.A. The thief demanded a huge sum from the Belgian government, not for the panel's return, but for information on where it could be found. The communication was cryptic, filled with grand pronouncements and political grievances. The central figure in the ensuing drama was a man named Arsène Godetier, a wealthy local stockbroker and a respected church warden. On his deathbed in November 1934, just months after the theft, Godetier confessed to his lawyer that he, and he alone, knew the whereabouts of the panel. His dying words were, "I alone know where the mystic lamb is. The information is in the drawer of my writing desk, in my office," but he died before he could reveal the exact location. The search of his office yielded a draft of one of the ransom notes, confirming he was almost certainly D.U.A. It also contained a cryptic clue suggesting the panel was hidden in a place where it was not subject to changes in temperature. This launched a massive search of the cathedral and its surroundings, but nothing was ever found. The case immediately became a labyrinth of conflicting theories. Was Godetier truly acting alone, as he claimed? Many investigators doubted, believing the theft required an accomplice. The panel was heavy and cumbersome. Removing it silently from a secured cathedral would have been a two-person job at least. Some speculate that Godetier was a pawn in a larger political scheme, possibly involving Belgian monarchists or even elements seeking to pressure the government, and that his death was anything but natural. Over the decades, the mystery has only deepened. The panel has become the holy grail of art detectives. It has been allegedly sighted everywhere, from a secret compartment in Godotier's former home to a crypt beneath the cathedral itself. One of the most persistent theories suggests it was hidden in a nearby railway station, perhaps walled up in a forgotten storage room and lost during renovations. Another, more dramatic theory posits that Godotier, fearing he would be discovered, destroyed the panel himself, perhaps burning it, and his deathbed confession was a final act of cruelty or a desperate attempt to preserve his legacy as a master criminal. The Belgian police have followed over 1,000 leads, some prompting official excavations, but each one has ended in disappointment. The absence of the just judges is a permanent wound in the world of art. In its place within the altarpiece today hangs a copy painted in 1945 by Jeff van der Wecken, a constant, stark reminder of the loss. The original, with its subtle brushstrokes and the unique vision of the Van Eyck brothers, is irreplaceable. Its theft was not merely a crime against property, but against culture and heritage. The mystery endures because it is so personal, so strange. It is a puzzle with a known culprit but no resolution, a ghost story where the ghost is a painting, whispering from a hiding place that has remained secret for almost 90 years, a silent judge waiting for its own final verdict. From the shadowy intrigue of a stolen panel in Belgium, we travel to the sun-scorched sands of the Giza Plateau, to a loss that feels almost cosmically unjust. After surviving for more than 4,000 years, the final resting place of a pharaoh was lost to the sea in a matter of months. This is the story of the sarcophagus of Menkora, a tragedy of archaeological hubris and the unforgiving power of nature. Menkora was the builder of the third and smallest of the Great Pyramids at Giza, a ruler of Egypt's fourth dynasty around 2,500 years before the Common Era. While his pyramid is less massive than those of his father and grandfather, it was originally encased in exquisite red granite from Aswan for the bottom third, a testament to its refined beauty. But the true treasure, the king's own vessel for eternity, lay hidden deep within. It remained a secret of the desert until 1837, when a British Army officer and explorer named Colonel Howard Vyse, employing what were then considered aggressive but standard methods, which included the use of gunpowder to blast through stubborn stone blocks, finally broke into the pyramid's burial chamber. What Vyse found inside was a moment of pure archaeological triumph. The chamber contained a magnificent, perfectly carved basalt sarcophagus, one of the most beautiful ever to be discovered from the Old Kingdom period. It was not a plain stone box. It was intricately decorated with the distinctive palace facade pattern, a series of recessed panels that symbolized the royal residence of the pharaoh in the afterlife. This was the coffin built to hold the mummy of Menkora himself, a sovereign's promise of eternal life, preserved in stunning condition. Eager to claim this prize for the British Museum and cement his own legacy, Vyse made the fateful decision to ship the colossal artifact to England. The sarcophagus was carefully, or perhaps not carefully enough, crated up and transported from the Egyptian port of Alexandria. Its conveyance was entrusted to a merchant vessel named the Beatrice, a brig that set sail in the autumn of 1838. The journey across the Mediterranean should have been routine, but for the Beatrice it was anything but. Somewhere between Malta and Spain, the ship encountered a ferocious storm. Battered by powerful winds and towering waves, the Beatrice was overwhelmed. It succumbed to the sea, taking its crew, its cargo, and the priceless sarcophagus of Menkora down to a watery grave somewhere on the Mediterranean seabed. The profound irony is that we know approximately where the ship sank. The location was logged by other vessels in the area, and Vyse himself recorded the tragic news. Yet, this knowledge has only deepened the mystery. The sarcophagus, carved from dense basalt stone, would have been immensely heavy. It undoubtedly rests intact on the seafloor, a solitary monument to a pharaoh's lost afterlife. But the Mediterranean at that point is deep, and the seafloor is a vast, shifting landscape of sand and mud. Over nearly 2 centuries, the exact wreck site of the Beatrice has been obscured. The sarcophagus itself may have become buried under sediments, or it may lie in a deep trench, invisible to sonar scans and beyond the practical reach of all but the most determined and well-funded recovery missions. The loss is particularly poignant because it represents a double failure. First, it was a failure of Wise's era of colonial-minded archaeology, where the priority was often the extraction of treasures for Western museums rather than their preservation in situ. The sarcophagus survived millennia safe within its pyramid, only to be lost because it was moved. Second, it is a failure of modern technology to rectify that initial mistake. We have the general coordinates, but the search area remains a proverbial needle in a haystack. The cost of mounting a deep-sea survey and recovery operation for a single object, however significant, has so far proven prohibitive. So, the sarcophagus of Menkora sits in silent darkness, a king's tomb inverted, its palace facade patterns unseen by human eyes, a permanent resident of an ocean museum we cannot visit. It is a stark reminder that some of history's greatest treasures are not hidden in secret caves, but are simply lying in places we find nearly impossible to reach. While the sarcophagus of Menkora represents a confirmed historical treasure lost to the elements, our next story ventures into the realm where exploration, myth, and human misperception collide. We journey now to the windswept, dramatic landscapes at the southern tip of South America for a tale not of a lost object but of a lost people, or more accurately, a people who may never have existed outside the fevered imaginations of early European sailors. This is the enduring legend of the Patagonian giants, a mystery born from a single, awe-struck entry in an explorer's journal that would captivate Europe for centuries. The story begins with one of history's most ambitious voyages, the first circumnavigation of the globe led by the Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan. In 1520, while navigating the treacherous strait that would later bear his name, Magellan's fleet sought shelter along the desolate coastline. It was here, according to the expedition's chronicler Antonio Pigafetta, that they made an astonishing discovery. Pigafetta wrote of encountering a native man of such immense stature that the Europeans' heads barely reached his waist. He described this individual as being so tall that the tallest of us only came up to his waist, and noted his voice was as booming as a bull's. The explorers, struck by the size of the man's footprints in the earth, named the region Patagonia, likely from the Spanish word Patagon, meaning big foot. This initial account painted a picture of a land inhabited by a race of gentle giants, setting the stage for a legend that would grow with each subsequent voyage. Fueled by Pigafetta's widely published journal, the myth took firm root in the European consciousness. Later explorers seemed determined to confirm the fantastic story. Sir Francis Drake's chronicler reported in 1578 that the English crew had encountered giants in Patagonia, even claiming to have taken the body of a dead giant who stood over 12 feet tall. Another Englishman, Admiral John Byron, grandfather of the famous poet, further solidified the legend in the 1760s with reports of a tribe of people averaging 9 feet in height. These accounts, repeated and embellished over 200 years, were not the ramblings of madmen. They were the documented observations of respected naval officers and scientists. They described a people of prodigious strength and peaceful demeanor, creating an archetype of the noble giant that fascinated philosophers and the public alike. So, what were these seasoned explorers actually seeing? The most plausible explanation points directly to the indigenous people of the region, the Tehuelche. The Tehuelche were, by any measure, a tall and powerfully built people. Anthropological studies suggest that the average male height was well over 6 feet, with some individuals certainly reaching 6.5 feet or more. To European sailors, who are often malnourished and of shorter stature, the sight of a robust, fur-clad Tehuelche hunter would have been genuinely startling. The thick guanaco skin boots they wore could have easily created large, deep footprints, explaining the Bigfoot moniker. Furthermore, their nomadic lifestyle and the harsh environment of Patagonia would have selected for strong, imposing physiques. The legend, therefore, likely began as a simple misunderstanding, amplified by cultural differences, language barriers, and the sailor's own propensity for tall tales after months at sea. Yet, the allure of a lost race of giants is a powerful one, and it has spawned more speculative theories. Some have suggested that the explorers encountered a surviving population of a different hominid species, like Homo heidelbergensis or even a relic Gigantopithecus, though no fossil evidence supports this migration to South America. Others propose that the accounts were deliberate fabrications, either by the explorers themselves to enhance their own fame and the prestige of their voyages, or by their sponsors to generate public interest and secure funding for future expeditions. A land of giants was far more exciting to report back to a royal court than a land of simply tall people. This brings us to the core of the mystery, the search for physical proof. If these giants truly existed, where are their skeletons? Despite centuries of archaeological work in Patagonia, not a single human skeleton has been unearthed that approaches the legendary heights of 9 or 12 feet. The tallest reliably measured skeletons from the region correspond to the known stature of the Tehuelche. The absence of such evidence is, for most scientists, the final nail in the coffin for the giant theory. The legend of the Patagonian giants stands as a fascinating case study in how myth is born from a kernel of truth, shaped by perception and perpetuated by the human desire for the extraordinary. It is a lost artifact of a different kind, not a missing object, but a missing reality, a phantom race that continues to stride through the pages of exploration history, forever just out of reach. Now let's shift from ancient mysteries to more recent, yet no less heartbreaking, losses that emerged from the opulent final days of the Russian Empire. The objects we are about to discuss are masterpieces of artistry and craftsmanship, created not for ancient pharaohs but for the last of the Romanov Tsars. We are talking about two of the legendary lost imperial Fabergé eggs, treasures that represent the pinnacle of the jeweler's art before they vanished into the chaos of revolution. The first is the imperial coronation egg, a piece of breathtaking significance created in 1897 to commemorate the coronation of Tsar Nicholas II and his consort Alexandra Fedorovna. Crafted by the workmaster Mikhail Perkin under the supervision of the legendary Peter Carl Fabergé, the egg's exterior is a marvel of translucent lime yellow enamel over a guilloche field of engraved gold, creating a shimmering effect that mimics the silk robe worn by the empress at the coronation. Encircling the egg is a pattern of double-headed eagles in gold, and it is crowned with a portrait diamond through which the monogram of the empress can be seen. But as with all Fabergé's imperial eggs, the true wonder lay inside. The surprise contained within this egg was a perfect, minuscule replica of the 18th century coach that carried Alexandra to her coronation ceremony. This coach, just 10 centimeters long, was a masterpiece in its own right, with working wheels, tiny steps that folded down, and windows made of rock crystal. It was an object of such intricate detail that it celebrated not just an event, but an entire era of imperial splendor. The second lost treasure is the royal Danish egg, also known as the Jubilee egg, presented by Nicholas II to his mother, the Dowager Empress Maria Fedorovna, in 1903. This egg was a deeply personal gift honoring the Empress's native Denmark. Made of gold and coated in opaque white enamel, it was decorated with bands of laurel leaves and contained a surprise of profound sentimental value: miniature portraits of the Danish king Christian IX and Queen Louise, who were Maria Fedorovna's parents. This egg was a direct link to her homeland and family, a poignant reminder of her roots far from the Russian court. Like the coronation egg, it was a symbol of the intimate bonds within the royal family, rendered in materials of almost unimaginable luxury. The fate of both these exquisite objects is a direct consequence of the Russian Revolution of 1917. As the Bolsheviks seized power and the Romanov family was placed under arrest, their immense wealth was declared state property. The imperial eggs, along with countless other treasures, were confiscated. In the 1920s, the new Soviet government, desperate for hard currency to fund its industrialization efforts, began selling off these imperial assets. Many of the eggs were purchased by Western art dealers and collectors, finding their way into museums and private collections where they remain today. But the trails of the imperial coronation egg and the royal Danish egg went cold during this period of frantic sales. They were documented as being sold, but to whom exactly remains a mystery. Their last known whereabouts were in the inventory of the Soviet agency responsible for the sales, and after that, they simply disappeared from the public record. This disappearance fuels a fervent hope among art historians and collectors that these eggs are not destroyed, but simply hidden. The most compelling theory is that they were purchased by a private collector who, for reasons of security, privacy, or perhaps even a lack of understanding of their full significance, never publicized the acquisition. They could be sitting in a bank vault or displayed discreetly in a private home, their owners unaware that they are holding one of the most sought-after lost artworks in the world. Given the meticulous craftsmanship and durable materials, it is highly unlikely they have simply deteriorated. The possibility that they survived the tumult of the 20th century is very real. Their rediscovery would be a monumental event in the art world. Not just for their immense monetary value, each would be worth tens of millions of dollars, but for the closure it would bring to a chapter of history that ended in tragedy. To find one of these eggs would be to recover a shimmering fragment of a lost world, a final, beautiful whisper from the final days of the Romanov dynasty. But now we step out of palaces and pyramids and into the quiet realm of the library, where the loss is not of gold or jewels, but of words and ideas. Our next group of artifacts represents a different kind of treasure, lost works of literature. These are the missing books, the unwritten chapters of our intellectual history, whose absence has left a void in our understanding of art, philosophy, and the human condition. And few losses are as tantalizing as the one concerning the great philosopher Aristotle. We all know Aristotle's Poetics, the foundational text of literary criticism that has shaped storytelling for over 2 millennia. It's where he lays out his theories on tragedy, defining concepts like catharsis and the tragic flaw that are still taught in classrooms today. But what many people don't realize is that the Poetics as we have it is incomplete. Ancient sources and references clearly indicate there was a second book, a sequel dedicated entirely to the analysis of comedy. Imagine that. The same brilliant mind that dissected the mechanics of Oedipus Rex, turning his analytical powers to the plays of Aristophanes, exploring what makes us laugh, the structure of satire, and the social function of humor. This lost second book could have fundamentally altered the entire course of Western literature. Would it have elevated comedy to the same philosophical stature as tragedy? Might it have inspired a parallel tradition of comedic theory, giving us a completely different understanding of narrative art? The loss is profound because it leaves our view of ancient thought lopsided, heavily weighted toward the serious and somber, with the joyous and irreverent side of the human spirit remaining largely untheorized by its greatest early critic. This fascination with comedy in the ancient world leads us to another monumental loss, a work so influential that Aristotle himself praised it. This is the epic poem Margites, attributed to none other than Homer, the legendary author of the Iliad and the Odyssey. While Homer's surviving epics are grand tales of heroes and gods, the Margites was something entirely different, a comic epic about a foolish anti-hero. The protagonist, Margites, was a man of profound incompetence, known for such absurdities as not knowing whether his mother or father had given birth to him. Aristotle, in the surviving part of the Poetics, called this poem the foundational inspiration for all comedy, just as the Iliad was for tragedy. The existence of a Homeric comedy suggests that the ancient Greeks had a far more diverse literary palette than we can now see. The loss of the Margites means we have lost the prototype, the comedy that could have shown us the origins of satirical humor and parody in Western culture. It's like having the blueprint for a cathedral, but only one of the two towers still standing. We can guess at the full design, but the complete majestic vision is forever obscured. To understand how such foundational texts can vanish, we must look to a third lost library, one that echoes the tragedy of Alexandria but on a more intimate scale. This was the collection of the poet and scholar Sappho, who lived on the island of Lesbos in the 6th century before the Common Era. Celebrated throughout antiquity as the 10th Muse, Sappho's poetry was renowned for its breathtaking lyricism, its passionate and personal exploration of love, desire, and loss. Unlike the grand, public epics of Homer, her work was often intimate and composed for private gatherings. Ancient sources tell us that her output was vast, filling 9 complete scrolls housed in the great Library of Alexandria. These were not minor works, they were considered masterpieces studied and admired for centuries. Today, however, we possess only a heartbreaking handful of her poems, and most of those are fragments. A few lines salvaged from scraps of papyrus used to wrap Egyptian mummies or from the recycled pages of medieval manuscripts. The vast majority of those 9 scrolls were lost to the same slow burn destruction that consumed the Library of Alexandria, compounded by centuries of neglect and the active suppression of her work by later authorities, particularly the medieval church, which found her candid expressions of female homoeroticism threatening. The loss of Sappho's complete works is a cultural catastrophe. It is the silencing of one of the most distinct and influential female voices from the ancient world. We are left with luminous fragments, phrases of such piercing beauty that they make the loss of the whole all the more acute. To have only a few pieces of her poetry is like listening to a sublime symphony where only a handful of notes have survived. The genius is undeniable, but the full, transformative power of the complete composition is a ghost that haunts the history of literature. These 3 losses together, Aristotle's theory, Homer's comedy, and Sappho's songs, represent a stolen inheritance, a library of thought and feeling that would have immeasurably enriched our world, leaving us to wonder what other colors on the palette of human expression have been forever wiped